Talked to Selena Chin, who's the boss of the Hong Kong Chinese Orchestra, all about a big event they're going to be doing on Saturday, powered by 5G. It's a joint venture with a phone company. Well, we kind of know what the letter and the number is, or do we? Good afternoon, Maurice. How are you today?
Yeah, very, very good.
So I think I'd really like you to take us through it, because I've been getting all these texts. I'm sure everybody has. Buy this phone and go and stand in that area and you can get perfect 5G. But where are we with this? What's the deal?
It's early days. So if you want to buy the
So
phone and
don't.
stand in that area, you can. But the reality is you're not going to get very much at this stage. So 5G is really a brand new technology. It's been around in development for about 5 years or so.
Yeah.
But 2020 was always slated for the year it was going to be rolled out. And its big vanguard was going to be the Olympics Games.
In Japan, of course.
Yeah. So it had always been, for the last 5 or 6 years, it had been talked about that Japan would be the showcase for what 5G could become. And its stadiums and all of its infrastructure was set up to do that, which makes perfect sense. Because what 5G really is faster, swifter technology.
Okay.
It lets us be able to see things, interact with things, get things much quicker than we ever did before.
Yeah.
So a little history of where the Gs have come from, starting off with 1G.
I'm going to put up a little picture I found that illustrates this quite nicely whilst you talk. Off you go.
Go for the picture, I'll go for the talking. So 1G, none of us even knew this thing existed. It was in the 1980s and it was used for analog voice. It was pretty much what we did picked up the telephone receiver and we kept talking. Nobody called it 1G. Even when it was 2G, and that started in the early 1990s, that was really when we began to look at digital voice. We began to talk about things like VoIP, which is Voice over Internet Protocol, which is a phone we could use. It's an analog line. We began to talk about digital lines.
Yeah.
And then 3G, which is where most of us came into the conversation. Even if we didn't have it, it's what we started to know when we bought our first mobile phones. So for most people, that was around the early 2000s. And we were using 3G, and it was very, very much mobile data. It was driven towards voice. It was not driven towards sending emails or searching or doing internet or anything like that. And that was the big difference. But around that time, we loved our mobile or our cell phones. We loved talking on them. But we were also beginning to use our PCs and beginning to use our laptops and our tablets to surf for information. And that's really what 4G brought about.
Yeah.
4G said that you can now do that on your telephone. And we began to get all sorts of new sets of handsets.
And we're talking 2011, around that time, I think.
2010-ish.
Okay.
Somewhere around there. So 4G came in. We got really excited the first time anybody really cared about it. I remember the big fanfare. And 4G is what we've had for the last 10 years or so. It's allowed us to do all the things that we now do on our mobile phone and take it for granted.
Yeah.
Now, that takes us 10 years, and that's a long time in technology land. That might well be the equivalent of 100 years. Since then, me especially, I don't know about anybody else on this planet, but me especially gets very cranky if I have to wait even a split second. I like things to be really fast, really quick. I want my searches to be super speedy. I want to be able to watch the internet and do all sorts of things. That's my expectations of this new device I carry in my pocket. 4G is struggling to do that. Not because it can't, but because so many of us want to do it and we want it so quickly, which is why about 5 years ago, a consortium of companies, technology companies, nobody specifically owns this 5G, but they got together and they dreamed up what this 5G might be. And that is swifter, faster technology. Basically, it's the equivalent of broadband on your phone.
Right.
So as quick as you might be able to get the quickest line at home, where that's 1,000 megabytes per second, which is very, very fast. Most people are somewhere between 20 and 100.
Right.
This thing will do sonic speeds, is what we are told. That's 5G. Get ready to do everything we used to do on a computer, a laptop, on your phone, and even quicker.
Yeah. Yeah. All right, then. Well, I've got another. Do join us on Facebook Live. We need the pictures today because it's really interesting when people do these sort of simple graphics. I've got another thing here that I'd like to put up, Maurice. And basically, I've already sent him this. Basically, it says X, Y, and Z can do it 10 times faster, 10 times this. So let's have a look at stuff. Latency is a big deal here. Now, they're looking at real decreased to about 1 millisecond, because latency is the problem we have on Wi-Fi, basically. And I think you and I might be just about to have some.
Yeah. Latency is when it chugs. So basically what we're talking about is, that thing kind of hiccups, it kind of like jumps.
Yeah.
And we've all experienced it from time to time. You know the person's there, you know you're about to hear it, but all of a sudden it just jumps. That's latency. And you're right, on 4G, we have about 50 milliseconds is the average. No quiz after this, Phil. And as you said rightly, we believe it'll go to under 1 millisecond.
Right.
So vastly, in fact, unrecognisable for most people. Theoretically, by the time we get 2 years down the track, all of this will be a nonsense, meaning that we'll be so used to fast speed that we won't imagine what we're doing now. Connectivity, which is the ability of devices to be able to hook up to each other, that quick handshake they do, is also going to increase dramatically. We're going from about 100,000 devices per square kilometre that are able to work in that space to about 1 million devices in a square kilometre.
Well, that's an interesting bit I want to look at now, Maurice, because on this graphic I have up in front of me, join us on Facebook Live and you'll see it, traffic capacity 100 times, it's saying. Tell me about that.
So we'll be able to have about 1 million devices hooked up for every square kilometre. So imagine that in Hong Kong, how dense it is and how many people are compacted into an area, and at times hard to get a signal out. It's not going to be anymore on this new technology.
Right.
Incredible ability for it to be able to hook up lots of devices. That's important, not because of mobile phones, because there are only so many mobile phones that people can have, but because of all the things we want to connect to it. So within a very short space of time, we're going to connect up all of our city infrastructure, our lights, our street lighting, our rubbish tins, all the cars that move in and out, all the trucks that move in and out.
So is 5G more appropriate for things, the Internet of Things that you've talked about?
That's exactly it. That's exactly what we're headed towards. Up until now, Internet's really been about you and I, humans, doing stuff on it. It hasn't really coped well with machines doing things. We've talked a lot in the past about what's called the Internet of Things, about smart cities, about autonomous vehicles, about robotics and drones. All of those were built on the assumption of 5G, that we would have really, really super fast technology that, regardless of how crowded it was in that area, would still be able to pick up a signal and still be able to do what we needed to do.
Let me ask you to explain a couple of other things here. It says 3 times spectrum efficiency. Looking at our graphic, achieving even more bits per hertz with advanced antenna techniques. How will that impact us?
Doesn't that sound good?
It does.
I want me some of that. So again, it's the same sort of thing. What we're able to do is we're really able to use our small devices in congested places and pick up a whole lot more information. We're also going to be able to pump information into a square kilometre, we being the buildings, the cities, the YouTubes, whatever else.
Yeah.
And for all of that to be picked up and seen really quickly. We haven't experienced it so much in the 4G, but some of us will remember back to the old days where you just couldn't get online, theoretically.
Yeah.
You just wouldn't pick up the web page. You couldn't get into YouTube. We still have that a little bit. It just couldn't do it. It couldn't find the bandwidth. It literally was stuck in a crowd of people and it couldn't push its way through. That's what you're talking about here. That crowd of people doesn't really matter anymore.
Okay.
It'll push through to get us what we need.
And the one that almost means something to us is network efficiency. They're saying 100 times optimizing network energy consumption with more efficient processing. That's what the end user wants when they pay their bill every month, isn't it?
It is, but it's also what the other end wants when we're sending information out. So what it's going to be able to do is use a whole lot less energy and bandwidth to be able to get the information out. At the moment, what it has, and this is a very crude way of explaining it, but it sends out waves into the air, and the waves are exactly that. They're kind of huge waves like U's and W's, really peaky ones. What 5G does, it flattens those things out. Nothing to do with COVID. It flattens them out so they can travel in a straighter line and more directly. Mm-hmm. And because it does that, it still has the entire space that the other one did. So you can imagine a whole lot of lines can fit into that little area more than those bumpy waves.
Right.
Make sense?
That makes sense when you explain it like this. It really does. And the other thing that I'm assuming will be good for doing things like we're doing now, they're talking about experience throughput, bringing more uniform multi-GPS. Gigabytes per second, sorry.
Yeah, and that's basically what I've talked about now. That because we're going to go in the basic straight line, there'll be a couple of little bumps along the way. It can really supersonic speed. And it will be able to then layer upon layer. So, you'll be able to talk about something, I'll be able to download something. Everybody will be able to use that space really well. 5G speaks a lot about efficiency. which
Right.
technology has gotten really good at doing. It's been more efficient than it ever has been before.
5 minutes or so left with Maurice. I'm really glad you're telling us about this because all the advertising is coming out now. Like, what's going on? If you've got any questions about 5G or anything like this, because Hong Kong is somewhere down the line going to be well into it, join us on Facebook Live and put it up there. Now, what about this thing about at the moment you can only be in little places? It reminds me of what they used to call the teen day scene when you had a pager and a crummy little phone in the 90s.
I love those pages. So what they're talking about is the reality that this thing, we know it will be. People have committed a lot of money to it. Handsets are being sold capable of it. But we really haven't had a lot of usage cases yet. So at this stage, it's all a lot of talk, a lot of hope, and a lot of things are being put into place. It will be another year or so before it becomes really useful and popular. So at the moment in Australia, I'm assuming it's the same in Hong Kong because I know it's the same in the States and Europe, is that they're putting up towers, they're changing the technology and the infrastructure. That's going to take a while for that to be done. That overhaul could take a number of years for it to actually play itself out.
What about all these rumours? I've got a graphic back up there of 1, 2, 3, 4, 5G, and it's gone from 1981 until now. And even now, some of them are speculating even more. I think we need to just chill and wait for it to happen first. Yeah, absolutely stuff. So the thing that we should be most concerned about, what about the rumour mongers?
Oh, I love a good rumour. So apparently COVID is caused by 5G, is one of my favourites going at the moment.
Oh, yeah.
Because the 5G, the power it emits, apparently, according to some, and it of course has been disproven, but others will not take that disproving. They still believe it to be true. The power that it's emitting has in fact allowed COVID to be spread even further.
Is this on the back of people for years have been saying if you hold a mobile phone, well, a 1G, next to your ear, it'll fry your brain and all that stuff. Was there any legs in that at all?
Yeah, it goes back even further, Phil. Do you remember the old days when we wouldn't buy a microwave because it was going to cook you from
Well,
the
it probably
from
would.
the outside?
It probably would in the 1980s when they first came out, or whenever it was.
So it really talks about the emission of these things, which is what's coming out of it, things you and I can't see. Look, most of the research comes out on the side of it being benign and there not being any harm whatsoever. It really is up to the individual to decide. I personally don't like holding it up to my head for a long period of time, which is why I think earbuds are a really good thing to do. But there is no conclusive evidence that any of these devices by itself causes immediate cancer or harm.
Okay, are there any downsides that you have heard that do seem to be true?
I haven't. I'm sure that there are, but none that I'm aware of. I mean, apart from the cost and the horrendous nature of getting it, none.
Yeah. All right, then. So you're always, you and my other Australian mates are often complaining that the telecommunications there is rubbish. How on earth are they going to stack up to 5G?
Oh, Phil, there's a whole afternoon gone just answering that. I've had trouble the last 3 weeks getting online with you with NBN. It's been awful.
Tell me what that was about. We've tried a couple of times and it's just been, rubbish.
When I can answer that, I will, but I can't because nobody has an answer. I mean, 5G as we're talking about, NBN is Australian government. They own the infrastructure, which gives us internet now, and everybody else buys from them or leases from them and gives it out.
So what does that do to you at home?
That means that if there's a problem, as I have discovered, the person I am buying from in my internet throws up their hands and says it's nothing to do with us. We have to go back to Mr. NBN. And Mr. NBN, of course, doesn't really care because he's not selling it directly to me. And I've spent 3 weeks in the blame game of everyone's fault. Anyway, thankfully, we have proven it and disproven. It actually took me a whole lot of engineers. I had an engineer in here and somebody on the line disproving their beliefs. But that's another story for hopefully another day.
Well, just to wrap up with, we've got about a minute before I have to split. Yeah. Surely accountability in this industry is absolutely crucial because you've proved there hasn't been much.
Yeah, it is, but what do you do? One of the things I did very early in the piece was I went to the Ombudsman, which is a government official who is responsible for looking after this. That's all that, in this case, she does. And I got the answer that you've lodged it with us, and now it'll take 3 weeks. So if it hasn't been fixed within 3 weeks, you can come back and let us know. Otherwise, it's up to you. So that's the kind of nonsense we have in Australia.
I mean, Australia has high-end artistic recording industries, everything that needs this kind of equipment. So how do the big boys that really rely on this communication work?
The answer is, the answer is the technology itself works really well when it works. And that's basically what it is. When it doesn't work, it's a real nightmare to fix. And we have spent literally trillions of dollars putting this thing in, and it's already archaic. I thought 10 years ago when we started the journey it was a waste of time and waste of money.
Yeah.
And I've said it ever since. And now we've proven it because you and I are talking about 5G. We're talking about microwave and satellite. All of the things that we'll be able to do soon without our NBN would have been available to us anyway, and we would have saved the money.
Well, thanks.
That's another conversation.
Thanks very much, Maurice. Honestly, in 15 minutes, you have managed to explain a lot of this really, really well. I appreciate it very much. Maurice Misalowski, live from St Kilda in Aussie. He'll be back with me at the same time next.